Have you ever walked into a room and felt like everyone else had life figured out, while you were just hoping no one would notice you didn't? What if that quiet doubt holding you back isn't a flaw in who you are, but simply a story you've been carrying for far too long? Welcome back to Slow Down with Brenda. I'm so glad you're here today. If you've been feeling a little tired, a little heavy, or just needing a quiet moment to catch your breath, you are in the right place. There is a subtle weight that many of us carry through our days. It's not always something people can see from the outside. You might be going through your routine, doing your job, taking care of your family, and looking perfectly fine to everyone around you. But inside, there's this persistent, quiet whisper that asks, "Am I really good enough for this? What if I fail? What if they realize I don't belong here?" We often treat self-doubt as if it's a sudden flaw, something that showed up uninvited to ruin our peace. But when we take a moment to sit with it, we begin to realize that self-doubt rarely starts in the present moment. It has history. It has roots. Think back for just a moment. When you were young, maybe around 4 or 5 years old, you lived in a world where your value was simple. You didn't worry about whether your hair looked right, whether your words sounded clever, or whether you were achieving enough. You just existed. Then, as time went on, subtle shifts happened. Maybe there was a moment where you noticed that performing a certain way made the adults in your life smile. Maybe you sang a song, danced in the living room, or got good grades, and suddenly you received warmth, praise, and attention. It felt wonderful. But as you grew a little older, perhaps around 8 or 9, you started feeling less comfortable being on stage. You started feeling self-conscious in your own body. Yet, because you saw how happy your performance made everyone else, you kept doing it. You didn't want to let anyone down. You didn't know how to say no. And right around that age, without even realizing it, a quiet belief took root deep inside. I am only worthy when I am making other people happy, even if I am hurting inside. That silent belief becomes an invisible pattern. It follows us into our 20s, our 30s, and beyond. It walks with us into university lecture halls, job interviews, team meetings, and difficult conversations with people we love. We bring it into every room, constantly feeling like we have to earn our right to be there. There was a fascinating social experiment done years ago that explains this exact dynamic so beautifully. Researchers brought a group of volunteers into a room and used realistic makeup to draw a large, noticeable scar across their faces. They held up a mirror so the volunteers could see themselves with this visible disfigurement. Then they told them they were going into another room to have a brief conversation with a stranger, just to see how people react to facial scars. Right before sending them out, the makeup artist said, "Let me just touch up the scar with a little cream so it doesn't dry out while you talk." But what the artist actually did, without the volunteers knowing, was wipe the scar away entirely. There was no scar on their face at all, absolutely nothing. The participants went into those conversations believing they were wearing a prominent, ugly scar. Afterward, when asked how the conversation went, almost all of them reported feeling judged. They said the stranger was cold, distant, tense, and kept looking at them differently because of their scar. They truly believed they were experiencing judgment. But in reality, there was no scar. What they were actually experiencing was the power of expectation. They expected to be seen as flawed, so their minds paid attention to every tiny neutral glance, every pause in speech, every slight movement, and interpreted it as judgment. They created the very reality they expected to see. We don't always see the world as it is. We see the world as we expect it to be. So I want to gently ask you today, what kinds of invisible scars are you carrying into your daily life? What old beliefs about your worth are you bringing into your workplace, your relationships, and your quiet moments alone? How much of the judgment you feel from others isn't actually out there, but is simply a reflection of the harsh way you look at yourself? Until we become aware of these unseen emotional scars, we don't realize how much they are shaping our lives, causing us to hesitate, second-guess, and shrink back from the very things we long for. But once we see them for what they are, just old expectations, not truth, everything begins to feel a little lighter. When we start to notice these invisible scars we carry, a natural question comes up. How do we actually handle the self-doubt when it shows up in our daily lives? Most of us have been told that the goal is to get rid of negative thoughts entirely. We tell ourselves that if we just work hard enough, read enough self-help, or practice enough positive thinking, we'll wake up one day and never doubt ourselves again. But setting that standard for yourself is exhausting, and honestly, it's completely humanly impossible. Your mind is simply doing what it was designed to do, anticipating risk, trying to protect you, and questioning unfamiliar territory. Doubt is just a natural mind function at work. Real peace doesn't come from destroying the doubt, it comes from changing how you carry it. Picture two simple glasses filled to the brim with clear, quiet water. The water inside represents your core identity, your sense of self, your inner peace, your worth as a human being. Now, imagine holding a lightweight ping-pong ball in one hand and a heavy, solid golf ball in the other. Both of these represent moments of doubt. It could be a fleeting thought in the morning when you look in the mirror, or a sudden wave of uncertainty right before you speak up in a meeting. If you take that ping-pong ball and place it gently on top of the first glass of water, what happens? It just floats right on the surface. It drifts lightly. The water underneath doesn't spill over. The water stays clear, calm, and unchanged. This is what healthy self-doubt looks like. You notice the uncomfortable thought, I feel a little nervous today, or I made a mistake on that project, but because it stays on the surface like a ping-pong ball, you don't allow it to mean something fundamental about who you are. You notice it, you acknowledge it gently, and you focus on what you can actually control. The doubt is there, but it doesn't sink into your soul. Now, think about what most of us actually do. We don't carry ping-pong balls, we carry golf balls. A golf ball is heavy and dense. When you take that heavy doubt and drop it into the second glass of water, it doesn't float. It crashes straight to the bottom. Water splashes everywhere, spilling over the sides and leaving less water in the glass. This happens when we internalize our doubt, when we take a passing feeling or an external mistake and turn it into a statement about our personal value. Instead of thinking, I had an awkward moment just now, the heavy golf ball sinks down and whispers, I am awkward. I am incompetent. I don't belong here. Notice what happens every time you internalize that judgment. A little bit of your inner peace and clarity spills out. You end up losing a piece of your peace trying to make room for that heavy weight day in and day out. And what happens when you finally do the inner work and remove that heavy golf ball? Suppose you fix the mistake, resolve the problem, or move past a hard situation. You reach into the glass and lift the golf ball out. Does the water magically refill itself to the brim right away? No. There is still an empty space left behind. When you've lived with self-doubt for a long time, it quietly becomes your default identity. It dictates how you walk, how you speak, how you over-prepare, and how you constantly seek approval from others. When you suddenly stop listening to those harsh inner critics, you might feel an unsettling emptiness. You might wonder, who am I if I'm not constantly trying to fix myself? What do I actually want when I'm not running away from fear? Entering this quiet, empty space isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you are clearing space. It's the gentle threshold where you get to rediscover your true rhythm. Working through self-doubt isn't about fighting your thoughts. It's about strengthening your inner container so that when a doubt arrives, it stays on the surface. You see it, you acknowledge it, but you no longer let it sink into your identity and spill your peace. To stop letting doubt sink like a heavy golf ball into our soul, we have to look closely at what's happening beneath it. At its core, self-doubt is often just a symptom. The root is usually a lack of genuine self-acceptance. Self-acceptance isn't about giving up on growing or telling yourself that everything you do is perfect. It is simply acknowledging that you are a work in progress and that your worth as a human being isn't something you have to earn every single morning. It's the quiet realization that you can work on yourself out of love, rather than out of a desperate need to earn the right to exist. When we don't fully accept who we are, we fall into a subtle state of self-rejection. We start rejecting ourselves before anyone else can do it first. In daily life, this doesn't always show up as obvious sadness. More often, it quietly shapes how we work, how we speak, and how we relate to the world. Think about how often we put ourselves on a treadmill of constant proving. We tell ourselves, once I get that promotion, once I hit that financial goal, or once I get that title, then I'll finally feel like I belong. So we work past exhaustion, we push our boundaries, and eventually we hit the goal. But what happens when we get there? The relief might last for a day, or maybe just a few hours. The deep feeling of I am enough never actually arrives. So, assuming we just haven't done enough yet, we immediately set the next target. We stay on a hamster wheel, chasing a destination that keeps moving further away because the issue was never our lack of achievement. It was our lack of inner acceptance. Or consider how we quiet our own voice just to keep the peace. When we doubt our value, we start outsourcing it to how others view us. We think, if they are happy with me, then I am allowed to be happy with myself. So we start over-apologizing for taking up space, for having feelings, or for expressing a simple opinion. We say yes when our mind and body are desperately screaming no. We keep quiet in meetings because we don't want to sound foolish. Bit by bit, we shrink who we actually are just to fit comfortably into someone else's expectations. And whenever a genuinely good opportunity comes along, a new role, a deeper relationship, or a chance to step up, our mind doesn't leap with excitement. Instead, it immediately starts whispering all the ways things could go wrong. What if you fail? What if they realize you aren't ready? Because carrying the pain of potential rejection feels too heavy, we talk ourselves out of it. We make a polite excuse. We tell ourselves the timing isn't right. We pull back into our comfort zone, choosing the safety of staying small over the uncomfortable beauty of growing. What's so striking is that these patterns don't just affect people who seem insecure on the outside. In fact, high achievers, leaders, creators, and hard workers often struggle with this the most. Their strong drive to succeed was born from a deep desire to prove their worth. But as they climb higher, the stakes feel bigger, and the fear of falling becomes overwhelming. If you recognize any of these habits in yourself, please don't use it as another reason to criticize who you are. It's simply a gentle invitation to pause, take a deep breath, and realize it's time to build a kinder, softer relationship with yourself. Building real self-acceptance doesn't require a dramatic, overnight overhaul of your life. It happens through small, intentional shifts in how you direct your attention and treat yourself every single day. When you find yourself spiraling into self-doubt or feeling the weight of expectations, here are 2 simple, gentle practices you can begin using right away. 1. Shift from sorry to thank you. When we struggle with self-acceptance, we often over-apologize. We say, sorry, I'm taking up your time. Sorry, I'm so emotional, or sorry for asking a silly question without realizing it. Constant apologizing highlights a perceived inadequacy and makes us feel like an inconvenience to the people around us. The next time you catch yourself about to apologize for simply having human needs or feelings, try making a small shift from apology to appreciation. Instead of saying, sorry, I'm talking too much, try, thank you so much for listening to me. Instead of saying, sorry, I'm being so emotional, try, thank you for bearing with me, I really care about this. Instead of saying, sorry, I'm late, try, thank you for your patience and waiting for me. This small adjustment changes everything. You stop apologizing for existing, and instead, you honor the other person's kindness. It feels much lighter for you and far warmer for them. 2. Practice the gentle pause. If you have a habit of saying yes to everyone because you're afraid of letting people down, saying an immediate no can feel terrifying. It feels selfish and uncomfortable. Instead of forcing a direct refusal right on the spot, create a small buffer zone. Give yourself just 5 seconds to take a breath before responding. Give yourself space to ask, am I saying yes because I actually have the capacity or because I'm afraid of disapproval? You can use a warm 3-step response. 1. Acknowledge with warmth, thank you so much for thinking of me. 2. Create space. Let me check my schedule and confirm my energy for this. 3. Set a boundary on time. I'll get back to you by tomorrow afternoon. When you give yourself time to reflect, away from the pressure of the moment, reframing your answer becomes easier. Saying no to a request isn't selfish, it's simply saying yes to your own peace. A gentle closing. Building unshakable confidence doesn't mean you will never feel fear, uncertainty, or self-doubt again. It simply means that when those quiet doubts show up, you no longer let them sink to the bottom of your soul like a heavy golf ball. You let them float lightly on the surface. You look at them with compassion, take a slow, deep breath, and keep walking forward anyway. You don't need permission to show up for your life today. You don't need to wait until you feel completely ready, completely polished, or completely flawless. You are a work in progress, and that is more than enough. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me today on Slow Down with Brenda. Take things a little lighter this week, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in our next conversation.